You know, there's a lot of great OU podcasts, but there's only one where the horns are always down. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Horns Down Podcast.
Horns Down Podcast, guys. You already know what's up. It's your host, Chris with a K, Chris Griffin. Follow me on Twitter at Chris with a _K at the Horns Down Pod. A lot of great content that's going to be coming up. Got a lot of stuff to really talk about coming off the heels of this spring game. But you guys see who I'm with. I'm with Barry Wise, Be Wise Fitness. That guy, Barry and Mack show. Definitely go and subscribe to that podcast and all of that stuff. But as always, don't let me tell you. Let's hear from the man himself. Tell us where we can find you at and your show and all your content.
Yeah, man. Find the Barry and Mack Show on YouTube. That's the main place that we're going to be putting that bad boy out. Also for the OGs, still on Spotify, still on Apple. That was the number one question we got asked whenever we made the full switch over to YouTube. That was the number one thing asked, but it will still be on there. In the meantime, between shows, we are doing massive cut-ups, myself specifically, over on my X. I'm trying not to say Twitter no more. Over on my X, at Be Wise Fitness, at letter B, WISE Fitness is mirrored. It's kind of weird. And over there, we're doing plays that we're going to talk about today, but we are diving deep into some of the performance attributes of some of the players, some of the things that we were able to see in the spring game this past week. You know, it's tough to see, and you know this, Chris, it's tough to always see a lot from a spring game, but there are things, particularly at the line of scrimmage, particularly in route running, delivery of the ball for quarterbacks. There are some things where you can glean a lot, and we're obviously going to talk about it today.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So with that being said, guys, like, subscribe, share. Definitely share this video. Send it to somebody right now because we're really going to get into some stuff. Look, we're just going to give our honest opinions, kind of look at these breakdowns, different things like that. Like Barry said, that they're cutting up over there on Twitter. So you get to hear from him today, and we get to do something a little bit different over here on the Horns Down Podcast. Like I've been telling people kind of behind the scenes, y'all. Trust me, I got a lot of funny stuff. I got some funny stuff tonight. But I really want to try to kind of, shift into some serious content and really break this down because, my goodness, we got to talk about Kaden tonight because we got some things to talk about. But with that being said, let's jump into the very first play. Let's go ahead and add it to the stage right here. We're going to highlight Kobe McKenzie on this play. I'm going to be quiet. Let you go ahead and go. Let's and we'll do 3, 2, 1. There you go.
Man, so first, shout out OnForm for this amazing app that I do all of this stuff on. But right out of the gate, Kobe McKenzie showcased all of the awesome stuff that we've been hoping for a linebacker at Oklahoma to be able to do. It took him a minute to get there. And there's another play here too I also want to touch on, but it took him a minute to get there. But Kobe he always had linebacker instincts. When he got to Norman, the issue was his feet and his trigger and getting his body right? We kind of heard it from the horse's mouth over on the podcast, some of the sources we had there. He was always good with the linebacking skills, the playing linebacker. But right here, what you see, a couple things. One, massively quick trigger. So if you roll the play here one more time, you're going to see him recognize, right? And in this case, this is one of those situations of just don't do too much. Just do the job you're supposed to do. Meets back in the hole, does not even hit the back with fantastic leverage. That's why he gets driven forward just a little bit. He was a little bit high going in there, but his strength, when you look at his face and just how he's leaned down, how he's changed his body over the past 2 seasons, it is really impressive. And when you take a look at this play, you see a guy who has developed as a linebacker, developed as an athlete, and a guy who could potentially be a big-time leader for the Sooners. And when you have McKenzie playing well. You have Lewis playing well, who proved last year he had a few moments, a few hiccups in different games, but by and large, 90% of the time, he proved he can get it done. You've got Stutzman, you've got Lewis Carter, but when you have a Kobe McKenzie, who in the SEC, Chris, how many times are you going to see plays like this in the SEC where guys are going to be trying to get downhill on you? There's nothing complicated, right? This is the type of stuff that Tennessee tried to do to Oklahoma in 2015, right?
Yeah.
And OU, they handled their business at times, but early in that game, they got run over, right? That's why they were down 17-0.
I mean, you go in there with a finesse, with more of kind of a finesse style running game, anyways, with Riley. So definitely it makes sense because at that time he still was trying to figure out how do I use P. Ryan and mix it in these games, So yeah.
And in this particular case, you've got in the SEC, you're going to face offensive linemen that are much bigger and badder.
Yeah.
Right. Dusty alluded to that on the broadcast. He also, hot mic moment, alluded to something else. I'm sure we might talk about that. But you're going to need big body, diesel level guys like McKenzie who can go in there and give you good minutes. You're going to need guys who can give you snaps that are meaningful, that aren't wasted snaps. Yeah. Again, there's another play I want to touch on, but here you see the trigger. You see his strength development that he's been able to acquire over 2 seasons. And we'll touch on another player too, but when it comes to what Venables said when he first arrived to Oklahoma, that it was going to be a process, that we should not expect players to walk in day one and be ready to go win you a national championship. And what we've seen with McKenzie and guys like him is that they do know how to develop players. Just look at McKenzie from where he was, even middle of last year, even some of the snaps in the previous year, to where he is now. It is night and day.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's definitely night and day. I mean, coming in, a lot of people were really excited about him. Had a lot of juices flowing, obviously, because, Lincoln left. He stayed, went to Texas, flipped, came right back. And a lot of people were really excited about him. Had a lot of hype coming out of him out of high school. Was a little bit scared there simply because of just, trying to shuffle in that room, BV coming and all the rest of that stuff. But we've all said it. I know I've definitely said it a couple of times before on this podcast. Look, at the end of the day, a lot of people were really screaming for can it. But when you're talking about Kobe McKenzie, it's starting to catch up to where he may be the better athlete. He may be the best athlete in the room. But when it comes to being the best linebacker, these other kids are going to be able to catch up and probably pass him on that totem pole. So it makes it natural for Kip Lewis, even though he's not big, it makes it natural for a guy like that to say, hey, I'm going to be here for probably 4, maybe 5 years to really develop into what I really want to become. Same with Kobe McKenzie. But at the same time, like I said, those guys are just natural linebackers. They've always played those positions. So, I mean, that's something that you just have to really, take into account.
Oh, well, 100%. And when you watch back the game, there's no question.
Yeah.
Stutzman, Carter, McKenzie, Lewis, and Sammy O, who was playing Cheetah. It looked like he played a little Willie. I'm not sure. The formational stuff, Damien's obviously got a little more knowledge on that. But Kinnick was vastly outplayed by the 4 lead dogs in that room. With Stutzman, Lewis, Carter, and McKenzie. Those are your guys with your Sammy O's, guy who can be a little bit more of a flex player, a cheetah guy, a guy you could put it, kind of that deeper spot, maybe have cover a tight end. And honestly, there are some plays where Sammy Omasigo is handling a Bauer Sharp, doing the right things, getting physical with him, doing things that it took a few years for Stutzman to get down. So seeing those things early lends you to say, man, there might be some better experience in the room. There might be guys who are just taking these younger guys under their wings, and that tutelage is happening at a more rapid pace. When you have vets in a room and guys who can kind of put an arm around the shoulder and say, hey, let's stay after practice. Let's run reps. Let's talk about what we need to do. You're expediting the process that the coaches wanted to happen in the first place.
No, I agree with that. You want to move on to the next point?
Yeah, man. We'll talk about, make sure I do this right. Let's see here. Tell me if it's up here. Can we see the move this? There we go. All right. So this play here, David Stone gets 2 points on the board for the defense. We're gonna let this bad boy roll through. Couple things here, just to identify. In the game, David Stone consistently had a really good get off on the line of scrimmage, right? These are things that I'm looking at from a performance standpoint. What is your reaction speed like? How are you flying off the ball? Are you staying low? Is that shin angle low? Are you going in horizontally or are you going in vertically? One of the things he did struggle with, and this is just being a newer, he's only been at Oklahoma for what, a handful of months.
Yeah, about 3 or 4, right? Yeah,
that's right. Todd Bates, he is a by far from finished product. So a lot of times you caught him playing high. A lot of times he was kind of overwhelmed by some of the double teams. You could tell his D1 bag isn't where it needs to be, where at the high school level he could win with strength, he could win with speed. You now got to win when you're playing, guys who have played a lot of football. You've now got to win with technique and win with skill. But in this play, you get to see some of the strength, some of the natural ability. Really good get off early, able to dip that shoulder. Really mobile guy. Like he's twitchy for being a big defensive lineman, which is what the Sooners have just honestly missed. Ends up a little high. But what I love about this and where the strength is showcased, he has horrible leverage. From here on out, his leverage is awful. But he's going to continue to push player back and collapse the pocket.
Yeah.
Having a player, and we talked about this, every national championship OU has been in, what has been the missing ingredient? It has been having defensive linemen, impact players who can shrink the pocket and get interior pressure, right? Now, if you can't get any pressure, that's obviously a problem. But getting interior pressure where you're knocking the center on their backside, that entirely changes the game. So get off looked fantastic. His strength, his overall mobility, which I think is going to get even better.
Yeah,
it will enhance. But man, there was a lot to like about him and Jadon Jackson. There's also a clip on my Twitter of Jadon Jackson doing some work. But Stone really showed, and just honestly, the tenacity, that not giving up, right? Another young player there might say, you know what? Poor leverage. I'm beat. This isn't going to be a winning rep. But he chooses to do otherwise, stays with it, and ends up actually pushing the pocket and getting the 2 for the defense.
He, when we were watching him in warm-ups, I went with my aunt, and when we were watching him in warm-ups and everything, it was like, man, it just felt like he got bigger. And I mean, obviously he put on the weight that he needs to, but it felt like he got bigger. And to me, it looked like he was still learning his body, how to play with that. Same way you talk about Devon Mitchell is the same way I think you talk about a lot of guys on this team, especially those freshmen, looking at Okoye as well. These kids are learning how to play with a D1, a Division I blue blood type of, body now, having to carry all that weight. And so we still got to remember these kids are 17, 18 years old trying to really carry all that weight, and they haven't done that before. So you're hopeful that by the middle of the season, by the time we face Texas, some of these kids will kind of blossom into what they're really going to be. And then some of these kids are still, you're sitting there like, no, we're still probably maybe about a year and a half away from seeing them really have it all under control. But man, there was a lot to like about what you saw from Jadon Jackson and Stoney out here, man. I thought Stoney, and that was something that I definitely noticed as well, is that kind of towards the finish, that's where his technique kind of got a little bit sloppy. So you just want to see him finish plays the right way, right?
Yeah, 100%. And when you arrive on campus, the OU's goal by putting that weight on him is to have him be a rotational piece by the start of the season.
Yeah.
Venable said it. They don't have a lot of vets in that room, and he was very honest about it. They obviously want to go to the portal and not have to rely so heavily on players like David Stone, right? As good as he is out of high school, you don't want to, hang your hat on having to rely on a true freshman. You just don't. But them putting the weight on him was them basically saying, we need you ready because you're going to have to play.
Yeah.
You're going to have to be a piece to what we're doing. And if you're not, we're not going to be the team that we are potentially capable of being. By you putting this weight on, you're going to get to where you need. The issue is when you go to put that weight on, you will get strong, right? The more weight, more mass, you're going to be able to move things easier because you're carrying more mass. Yeah. But the foot speed, the mobility, as you talked about, being able to be good with that weight, that's what takes time. That's why you want that process to be 1, 2, sometimes 3 years, especially on the offensive line. Move over to that side, you got guys who really need a solid 2 years before they're ready, because it just takes that long to get strong enough to move your body. Like you have 2 different aspects to movement. Well, when it comes to being explosive, you have strength, right? Whether relative or absolute, that is your ability to just move the thing, to exert force. And then you have rate of force development, which is how quickly that force is being expressed. That's the piece that can take time, right? You might have a guy who could deadlift a house. How quickly that weight is getting moved is a different thing. And that's the part that just the guys need time, guys need seasoning.
Yeah. Everybody in the chat, I'm going to say everyone was there. Anything you noticed from some players that you liked or did not like? And I want to segue that into this next play, because this is kind of, I think this is kind of like a smaller detail clip that you're kind of trying to get at. This is the play I think you were talking about, Bauer Sharp right here, where, he's keeping his feet forward, right? Mm-hmm. So let me go ahead and play that real quick for you.
Yeah, so here, Deion Burks obviously catches this ball and gets out in front, and that's what everybody's going to see. One defender here is going to be unblocked. This was a play OU ran last year, right? Uh-huh. They ran it in the Oklahoma State game to not very many yards. I think they had one that ended up being successful. And the critical piece to this, when you pause it right here, this block from Bauer Sharp out here on the edge has to be money. If you do not keep your feet and you cannot keep the guy in front, that defense is going to put Burke in a bind. It doesn't matter how fast he is. If you're able to create leverage on the field and force him back inside, he might pick up a few yards. He might get lucky and shake a guy, but it's not going to go for easy chunk yardage. And one of the things missing from this offense, from the Levy offense previously, that I think just by sheer talent coming into the program, but also who you're choosing to bring in terms of right fit, Bauer Sharp is a good athlete, right? There's another play he has also in this game. I was like, man, that's kind of impressive. And it was another block. So I guess you could complain maybe about how much he's seeing the ball or not seeing the ball. But if he's not executing this block, which I'll just be honest, last year, this was Stogner's Achilles heel.
Yeah.
Was getting out on the edge against guys who had better foot speed than him and being able to stay in front. And
you saw it.
You saw it.
You saw it at the OSU game an awful lot. I mean, Levy really got into his swing pass bag and would not get out of that, even though they were gang tackling or hell, they were shedding blocks and gang tackling out there simply because we couldn't hold blocks up. I mean, you had lanes. You're looking at when Smothers caught that one swing pass. Smothers had some space out there in front of him, but he needed those blocks to be picked up. And then even at that, you had Smothers and some of your other guards, some of your other running backs who just weren't good at pass blocking anyways. Damn near you're not going to put them on the island to go up against a linebacker that's coming downhill. And so, yeah, I mean, I thought this was important to show simply because you get to see kind of, that detail that you're wanting to see. And you're going to see some similarities to the Levy offense out there. I think one thing that I saw is that he doesn't really care about the spacing. You'll see guys lined up everywhere. You see guys really wide by the hash, but you'll see guys, kind of just, lining up regularly. But also the thing is that you saw some similarities like this and some of the kind of the stacks and different things like that, those stack plays. But you saw, I think you saw better effort out there. Now, I'm not going to say that Barrett Sharp is going to be the, world's greatest blocker, but he's a willing blocker. And so you're wondering how good of a blocker is Kaden Helms going to be once he gets back, because I know they're taking things slow with him. I feel like I know that Jake Roberts is going to be a really good blocker. I'm just ready for him to get healthy as well. So when those things come together, I think that's going to open up this offense simply because when you get used to that, then they're going to hit you with those seam routes and then have those tight ends do a lot of stuff too. Because if you go and watch that Latrell offense, he loves to use his tight end as well. And that's going to be something that I'm really, really interested in seeing. He usually tight ends mostly like an H-back during the spring game. But I think that you would be foolish to think that he wasn't going to come in there with a kind of an Alamo bowl or just kind of like a base install, obviously keeping it vanilla, So I think that's something definitely that we have to keep in mind. But yeah, I mean, it's plays like that right there that kind of determine the outlook of the game, because if you're doing the little things right, you're going to do the other things right as well.
Yeah, man. I want to stay in this next clip, staying on the Bauer Sharp train. So in that clip, one of the things that I loved was his foot speed, just the agility to stay in front of a guy. That is incredibly, incredibly difficult. Yeah, here's the clip. Here, he wins the rep, right? This is PJ. They kind of have changed the pronunciation of how they're saying his name. So
Let me go back.
Yeah. But man, he wins this rep against a player who is, I would argue, the longest player on the team in terms of overall length. And we saw Ethan Downs take Bauer Sharp to the woodshed at one point, right? He gave him the what for, kind of the big veteran shoulder, the big veteran shrug off, and then got to the quarterback. But on this play, you see the feet again, right? You got to think about how much ground PJ is covering in one stride, and Bauer Sharp is handling it, right? Takes the initial punch, which is a pretty nasty punch, takes him wide, and then here's what I love, right? Doesn't give up, able to get back inside, lets PJ move his body, but quickly gets his feet right back down, almost like an offensive lineman when you're coached in pass blocking. You got to be able to move, set your base quickly, not let your feet get too far off of the ground, right? That is just performance. And this is a stellar job against a guy who we think in PJ should be a freak for the Sooners in terms of being able to perform on Saturday and get those sacks off that weak side. He is a player who should be dominant. And Bauer Sharp shows that he's not intimidated by the length. He's not intimidated by who he is as a player. And he goes in there and just handles business.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm all over the place right now. I think Carvin said, what about fullback and H-back position? I think that, and I don't think they're going to telegraph it, because I think Roberts is going to be durable once he gets back. And I think that you want, especially Kaden Helms, who I think is could potentially be a more athletic Grant Calcaterra.
Mhm.
I think you're going to see more than just kind of H-back stuff, but you will, like I keep saying, it's that split bluff zone because he likes that split zone stuff. Latrell is who I'm talking about. When they get in there and they run that split bluff zone, and you see Jackson Arnold running down the sideline for a 40-yard running touchdown, you're gonna be like, oh wow, okay, now I see it. So you'll see it like that, but I think they're going to actually use their tight ends. So
Yeah, I think so too. I think Bauer Sharp is a guy who gives you a lot of flexibility. Right, he's a player who can go get into the backfield. You can put him on in line. You could split him out. Obviously, he's a guy who gives you some flexibility. He's not going to be a Devon Mitchell, not even probably going to be a Caden Helms, but he's a guy who can absolutely give you good reps out of the backfield or on the line of scrimmage. And if you can move your feet, if you're strong, and if you got some decent length to you, and the offense, the scheme is right, you can be impactful at that tight end, H-back kind of flex position, which we see in the NFL now. It's almost, you don't see a lot of fullback, right? That position's kind of mostly gone, right?
Unless you go to Baltimore, that's like the only place that's still running with like kind of a lead back. Right?
Yeah, so a lot of it is just getting players to want to do that. You don't have a lot of players who even want to do that anymore.
No.
So that there's some convincing on that side, just from trying to get a Dimitri Flowers kind of guy who's a ready and willing blocker, but maybe needs to be enticed by some touches out of the backfield, some catches, right? Whereas at tight end, a little more glamorous. You got some more NFL potential if you've got the measurables. So I think the Bauer Sharp to me is a guy he can be flexible. He's a really good athlete. That was when OU picked him up. That was the first thing I thought was just, you're getting a heck of an athlete at that position.
Man, if watching those one-on-ones, man, he looks really good out there, and he's winning some. He's winning a bunch of those one-on-ones as well.
Yeah.
Here's another guy that we got in the portal. I think this is gonna be a cool clip. This is Woolard. Didn't notice it a lot, but man, if you go back, you see some really good things from him. You know, I was there at the game, so didn't see it live per se. Maybe I wasn't looking for him. Saw him out there on the field, but I didn't think he really had that big of a day. But he had some nice plays, man. He strung a couple of nice plays together. If you want to go off of this one.
Yeah, man. So I'll just say here, even before you run it, I thought he was, outside of Ethan Downs, who I think was the obvious, player off the edge, right? I think everybody would agree that Downs had himself a really solid day. I don't know if any player consistently affected the pocket more than Kaden Ward, which what have we said as Sooner fans, as the folks watching the game, that we want to see out of this team? It's the ability to get some pressure off that weak side, right? It's the ability to get some pressure on the edge with a defender who has good bend, who has good length, and could put a hand in the face, right? One of the plays to Jaden Gibson in the red zone that ended up I believe it's not even a reception, was all Woolard, right? It's not one that shows up on the stat sheet. It's not one that you're going to see, but his effort and his technique and his ability to keep his feet is what made the play. But yeah, you can roll this one here. This one seems so simple, but what you see here is a guy who has a very quick trigger. If this trigger isn't quick enough, Hawkins is out the gate, or he's able to make this move on his timing, right? He's able to go through things a little faster. But Woolard hesitates for a second, right? You see that clock sort of turning in his head. He's having to make decisions. And man, he covers 6 yards in no time. Yeah. He is explosive, right? If I'm not mistaken, I believe his dad was an edge player, right? So he's got a lineage of this, which means usually when you have guys who were sons of athletes who played certain positions, you're going to have guys who are often very technically proficient. And he's a guy who just seems to play with very good technique. He's a player who plays low. He's always got an arm up when the ball is out. but I love the explosiveness. He digs that foot in the ground and he goes. And he is who, this is one that, as I said, it's not going to show up on the stat sheet, but you force the incompletion because of that edge pressure, and now you're at 2nd and 10. Right. And that's the kind of impact that a guy like that a guy like Woolard can have on this team. And you see that.
Hey, I was just gonna say, if you're looking, let's go back. Keep your eye right here on Ford. And I believe that's Sexton right there, right? At your left tackle. Keep an eye on Ford. What the hell was going on here? Ford was like, okay, let's go.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that. Yeah.
Hey, I'll be honest with you. I thought Ford, nobody's talking about Ford. I think Ford is going to have a pretty good year this year. I think you're going to use him in situations. I think he's going to be the odd man like Stripling was, to where, and I think he's going to be everything they wanted Stripling to be, except he's going to be healthy and actually be able to be on the field. But I think Trace Ford is going to have a decent year, simply because I think when he's out there, he's in the obvious situations to get to the quarterback. And I think that last year you saw glimpses of it. But I've given Smitty so much love, man, because some of the guys that you didn't think you were ever going to see, these guys are on the field. The JJ Hesters, you didn't know I didn't know if Ford was even going to make it through this camp. But Ford is out there for a spring practice. When's the last time you've been able to say that? Probably when he was at OSU. So
early at OSU.
Yeah, or early at OSU. So shout out to Smitty, but I do believe that Woolard and Ford, you may see, you're definitely gonna see them in the rotation. I think they're definitely gonna be in the rotation.
Yeah.
Could you see Woolard starting?
I think that will be the question mark. Is he a second, third series kind of guy, or is he ideally? No. Ideally, you want a PJ or an RMT, a guy like that who is just elite twitch, who are, if they can nail down the position and get the technical aspects right, which maybe that might be what's more troubling, is that a guy like Woolard really stood out in certain instances, and players like PJ, they had a few nice plays, but you don't see consistent domination. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, but would a Chase Young have been okay with a Bauer Sharp just saying, I'm gonna handle you for a rep here on the edge and make you look like you can't do anything?
Yeah,
I don't think a Chase Young or a Joey Bosa or the guy from Michigan, right? I don't think they wouldn't take that lightly, right?
Yeah.
That they want to dominate every play, and you haven't seen that yet from PJ. And to me, one of the things when he was coming out was, and I don't mean to kind of transition too much into this, but it is a concern. When he was coming out of high school, elite length, very explosive. When you watch his high school film, he did not have a lot of control of his body. He was very out of control on edge rushes. He just closed so much space that at that high school level, it was hard to have the ability to maneuver around him. You get to the college game and good tackles, right? Like the tackle at BYU, where he had a few plays, but he's an experienced guy, NFL guy, going to get drafted. He handled PJ pretty good, and it was not a huge factor in the game. So just looking at the development and how those guys are coming along technically, the fact that you consistently have, a Ford who really kind of built his game at Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
You have an Ethan Downs who, maybe he's a little bit more like a Miguel Chavis, right? In terms of he's having to be a guy who's an effort guy, had to really focus on getting his body right. And maybe there's something not connecting from a teaching aspect with guys who are a little bit more of your twitchy, natural, superstar athletes like a PJ and RMT, who RMT, I thought he was the steal of the class.
Yeah.
And according to what we heard, he was OU's best pass rusher in the fall when he came in as a true freshman. He was already their best guy. But not seeing that, and he's struggled to stay healthy. I think we all know that. But not seeing that come to fruition yet, a little bit troublesome. So I want to see how that plays out going into the summer and then going into the fall. Who gets that starting nod at the edge position? Maybe it's a good problem to have, that you do have a bunch of freaks out there that you can interchange and play. And OU wants depth.
Yeah.
But it is a little bit concerning that PJ, it doesn't seem like that light bulb has of not flash plays, but just I should be able to dominate this player in front of me who I've got 2 inches and 20 pounds on, or whatever the case may be. I'm not sure specifically. I think PJ's up to near 260 now. I could be wrong on that, but I want to say he's in the ballpark.
It just comes down to there's certain players on this team, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, there's certain players on this team that could not afford to take mental reps this year. You got to have every rep, every individual practice, every group, every unit practice. You got to have it. Like it matters. This summer leading into the fall is going to be really important for a lot of guys, especially guys trying to earn a job out there. Last play that we'll go over is going to be this one with Jadon Jackson. Before I start this play, I just want to know, what is it to you? Obviously, we could talk about Stoney all day. We can talk about Woolard and some other guys that you like. But obviously, you've heard that the kind of one of the guys who's been the talk of camp has been Jadon Jackson. Mm-hmm. What makes Jadon Jackson so special, in your opinion, before we start this play?
I think he's technically just more sound than the other guys coming in as freshmen. When it comes to I'm going to oversimplify this from a performance standpoint, but if you're looking at what is offensive and defensive line, and like what is it at its simplest form? It is a leverage and power game. And the players who can consistently generate the best leverage, whether it's using hand tricks, whether it's using fakes, whether it's their get off, the players who generate the best leverage are the players who win the reps. So when you have a guy who can come in and add a good 10, 15 pounds, but also still maintain really good technique. And what I mean by that is he's quick out of his stance. He plays low and stays low and has extremely strong hands. Those are the basics, and quick feet, obviously. Those are the basics of the position. And to me, Stone, he's really good, and he's probably going to end up being the best of the bunch. But he still plays too high at times. He still gets caught in some funky scenarios. Jackson has just kind of dialed this thing in for himself, where he knows how to attack. He knows where those points are, and he gets after it, right? And this play, I heard somebody in the comments talk about, it might be a little mishap in the backfield with the offensive line in terms of footing, but the result is the result. And he got this accomplished, and it was impressive. So here, stays low, plays low. He put the center on his ass, which is what you want to see, right? How often have we seen or not seen that as Sooner fans the past few years? Again, it's that interior pressure, being able to stop the play, right? He may not have impacted it hugely, but in a lot of games, you've now forced a play like this to go wider. You've now allowed your defense more time to get there. You're now playing the space game where your defensive players, who are the faster guys, have the ability to get to the ball carrier easier because you've created a leverage advantage.
No, I mean, my uncle always say, if I can just butt in, my uncle always says, like, hey, the way I look at, especially some D tackle, it's not necessarily about sacks or this and that. It's, can you force them? Can you take something away from them and force them to do something different? Can you force them to stop running up the middle and start running to the edge? Because if that's the case, then you've done your job, because now they're having to isolate one side that they feel like is the weaker side, and then you can focus on that side as well and shut them down. They're going to have a hard time running the ball. So if guys are doing things like this right here, then that helps us an awful lot, right?
Oh, absolutely, man. And it happens because of his technique, right? Him staying low and having he has such great balance for a big guy like that. And he is still a pretty long athlete. He looks stockier because he's a little shorter than Stone. He doesn't pop, the length doesn't pop off. But when you if you were to be around him up close, he is a lengthy athlete. Yeah. But he has great balance. He maintains his feet, which I actually thought was maybe the most impressive thing of the play. Him being able to stay on his feet. And then, again, he's racing out to the ball carrier, man. He's out of the play, but he is racing out there, and he's one of the guys you see in the screen before they cut to the next play.
Yeah. I'm really excited. And like I said, looking at some of these highlights that we brought up, I'll be the first to say, man, I think our defensive line is better than what has been advertised. Definitely got to give Bates and Chavis, a shout out, because I think our D line is like I said, as a whole is better. And speaking of that, let's go ahead and transition into some recent news, different things like that to kind of finish this out. Guys, go ahead. If you got any questions for Barry or me, just go ahead and start putting those in the chat. Let's talk. Obviously, we're going to get to kind of the mechanic situation and all the rest of that. But I think first off, let's go ahead and start this off with some good news. Obviously, you guys have seen Germaine Lole, I think that's how you say his last name, from the Louisville, the kid from Louisville. He committed to us, which you heard a lot of rumbles about it, that he's probably going to shut that down pretty quickly. But this is another kid. It's 310 plus pounds, defensive lineman. If you guys didn't watch Louisville last year, you're kind of missing out, simply because Louisville was pretty good last year on defense. Yeah. And this is a guy that's coming from there, that I know that he has some good principles to work with, but I also know that he's going to be a decent D lineman, and this just adds real depth to the room. Some people may say that he's injury prone, but he's really just had kind of some bicep issues or whatnot, from what I've heard. But I think, man, getting this kid, a lot of people said, hey, when we were flirting around with the D tackle from Indiana, a lot of people say, okay, well, which three do you want? They say, I want this kid and I want Williams out of those three, Williams being from TCU. So I'm excited about him. Have you watched any film? Have you been able to kind of read any tea leaves about him?
Yeah, man. I mean, he's a guy who's I kind of put him in, and maybe some might take this disrespectful, but a little bit like a Chris McClellan type player in terms of impact, right? McClellan definitely has the higher ceiling, right? But he's a guy who, if this is 2 or 3 years ago, it's critical that and it's critical for depth. I don't want to kind of put that out there, but OU has some guys with that elite high level ceiling. To me, he feels like a player who can get into that room, be a Bothroyd Ford type presence.
Jonah Lalalu,
yeah. Well, where you're a guy who's been through it a little bit. You've been through some battles. You are a college player, right? Full through and through. His body looks really good. I wouldn't say he's the most explosive guy in the room, right? OU now, that they're to the point that anybody they get out of the transfer portal, very likely not going to be more explosive than who they've recruited, right? Yeah. OU now, with Venables and the way that staff knows how to evaluate the young guys, which is how you build your program, and then you fill gaps in the transfer portal. You don't build it out of the portal. You're just begging for 7 and 5. Look at USC. But guys like this are players who can be a presence around a young guy. They can give you 10, 15, 20 quality snaps. be a big body that you can put in the middle, right? Be a guy who you can put over a guard, put over a center, do some different things in a pinch, and not lose anything, right? He's not undersized at all. You're not bringing in a player who needs a lot of weight room work, right? I'm sure OU will fine tune him and they'll figure out ways to polish him up and find the metrics that they need to find in him to identify maybe what he needs to work on. I've talked with Damian at length. That was one of the things that made Schmitty so good, was he really understood what a guy needed to look like for them to be a potential, Pro Bowl NFL player, right? Well, what do your feet need to be? What does your strength need to be? What does your speed need to be? And let's get it there, and then let the coaches handle the technical piece. But we're going to get there body wise.
I think with this guy, you found your Jacob Lacey. I think that's exactly what you found.
That's a great point. Yep.
So moving on to the Williams kid, have you heard anything that would, help everybody kind of sleep easy? Because I think that's the one that we're all waiting for. I think that yesterday people were hopeful simply because he was still on campus for a long ass time. He ended up going to the Thunder game, which I think a bunch of recruits did. I think you probably hooked that up for a bunch of them. So obviously it was a great weekend. I think as an insurance policy, as he's those terms have been floated around, he's wanting to go to Texas at least, and some other schools just to see. But from everything I've heard, NIL is not an issue. Looks like he has more connections than on the field to OU, and when I say he has some off the field connections as well. So I'm pretty positive about it, but him leaving campus definitely kind of left a sour taste in a lot of fans' mouth, because I think we all felt like we were going to be able to close that down with the way that the news was coming out about his visit.
Yeah, it's one of those things where OU really has a lot to leverage finally, right? That their NIL is absolutely competitive, particularly when it comes to some of the elite positions of need. And to get a guy like him, who fought the Big 12 wars and is a really solid player and very good athlete, it would be huge. I think it's very tough to call, and I don't want to sour OU fans' view or thoughts of how this possibly turns out. But man, I think OU is in this battle. They're a team that they finally have a lot to showcase, right? Texas has the CFP, but OU has, at this point now, a defense that had moments of being really, really good. And, oh, by the way, beat this Texas football team. So to me, you've got Todd Bates and Chavis, who have shown that they can do work getting elite guys to change their mind and pick Oklahoma. And they have a blueprint now for how they want this defense to look. And you don't have bums around them, so to speak, right? I use the bums very loosely, but you got some top tier talent in that room that's going to draw some doubles, and you're going to have some guys free. There were moments when I was watching the game on Saturday where I'm like, man, you've got PJ getting double, you got RMT catching a double, you've got Stone, and man, at a certain point, you're going to have a player have an impact game if you got nothing but studs, and that's how Clemson built the program. So, nothing of note in terms of anything major, I would say, out there outside of what's already been, reported by everybody. Yeah. But I think OU can be confident, right? Yeah. Anytime go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, Carvin's on here. He's saying that Williams was offered a good NIL package. He said, we will see. From everything I've heard, NIL was not the issue, Carvin. And I also heard that OU went all out. OU had went all out, and they were very aggressive, which is kind of surprising given, kind of what we saw, late December, kind of when the first, not late December, but kind of, around that time when the portal first opened up, as they were being radio silent or whatnot. I guess it was for times like this. So I think that you have an obvious need. I think you're in a really good position. You're coming off a 10-win season. So I mean, I think there's a lot of momentum for this program, and then obviously just the coaches around that can get you to that next level. Let's see. Let's go ahead and we've been on here 49 minutes. We could probably talk about some other stuff, but let's talk about this right here. Seems like everybody wants to talk about Kaden. What are we going to do with Kaden? We got Boomer 129. He's saying would like to see Kaden return kicks. Probably not. I don't know. Let's see.
He's not shifty enough to do that.
Let me give a shout out to my guy, Jason, Hall of Fame College Football Podcast with Jason and the coach. And they'll be on at tomorrow night. You already know Tuesday night's the show. So definitely check that out. Might run that up with him as well. Tyler Walker, he said, run the highlight plays. You think Kaden looked bad? I watched every down he played. He didn't play bad like people are acting or saying. I mean, there was a play or two where I think some people were like upset, and then you still got to think about Boganowski was out there looking down at his play sheet, different things like that. Those, obviously you can say those guys are young, but the way that BV defense is like it's so many interchangeable parts, but everybody has a purpose for being out there on the field. And we've seen that go back to the 22 season against TCU when you had blown coverages and all the rest of that stuff, is because somebody inside somebody who was linked to that chain was not doing their part, So it's a bunch of working parts that are supposed to work together. Every defense is, but especially BVs. So I don't necessarily know if we can blame him for a lot of stuff, but it just seemed like at times he got a little bit lost when things kind of sped up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's been what we talked about in the show that we did leading up to spring ball, man. He really struggled last year because linebacker is still it is him trying to speak a foreign language because he has not played it enough. And here for those who would say he played a really good game, I would say, and maybe you could do this with a couple guys, but show me the plays where he read, reacted, and met a guy in the hole, not backside, right? Not behind the play where he's able to use that straight line speed, use that athleticism, because there was a few of those. I'm talking about read, react, and play linebacker, because I saw Stutz do it. I saw Kip do it. We obviously showed the plays where McKenzie did it, right? Show me the plays where Kaden just straight up played linebacker and made the simple play, right? He's still struggling to get depth in pass coverage because he struggles he's having difficulty at times reading that quickly enough. And if you can't read it quickly enough, it doesn't matter how good of an athlete you are. In the D1 game, you're going to be late because you're talking about fractions of a second that make a difference, right? When you're watching Kobe read that guard and he's going left or right and then he's shooting the gap, that's just being able to play the position. But when you've got Kaden who has to hesitate, wait a second, you can have all the athleticism in the world. You're not going to be able to, and I like this comment right here. I might be a fan of putting him in the backfield. I don't think he should be returning kicks. I don't think he has the shiftiness. He doesn't have sort of that get away from you speed that they've got guys like that on the team already, right? Deion Burks is a stud. Peyton Bowen, I think, has the potential to be one of the best punt returners of all time. Put him on kickoff too. I don't care. He's a phenomenal athlete. But Kaden, you give him a head of steam in the backfield, going in a straight line where he knows where he needs to be. I might be. What do you think of that?
I'm scared. First thing that comes to mind are we going to stunt his growth, right? Because look, if it took Isaiah Simmons 3 years to crack the lineup to even get on the field, really, to really to blossom into what he was, obviously he got snaps, he got playing time, but to blossom into the player that he was, that first round talent, it took him a while. It took him a long time. You're just saying, are we running out of time simply because you know that Kaden didn't? I don't think Kaden redshirted. And so
he played he
yeah,
played
so it's one of those things where I want to get the most out of the kid, and I want to put him in position to go and do something because he is that type of athlete. So, do we wait until year 4 and not see him that much on the field this year, or do we try to make a switch, or do we try to do something else? I don't know, but I don't know if you put him at fullback or H-back simply because I don't necessarily know if that's a need, especially if Caden Helms, Jake Roberts come back and they're healthy and they're ready to play. And then also, who knows, maybe the light bulb finally goes like that for Devon Mitchell, and then he's putting everything together. Watching him in warmups, that kid, I think he's kind of like Ethan Downs. Once he finds his weight to play at, he's going to be special. That kid is going to be special. But no, I mean, look, I'm not rooting against the kid. I think Kaden is a very, very athletic player, but I think Carvin said it here. Venable runs a complicated system. He does. It's very complicated. Yeah. So, yeah, no, I mean, we're just throwing stuff out there. I mean, I think the thing is, Tyler, is that a lot of people want to see the kid succeed. So we're trying to figure out where does he succeed at, because that linebacker room is serious right now. And it arguably, even with what you have on in the secondary, the linebacker core may be your most talented unit of your defense this year.
Yeah, I mean, and here's the problem that he's facing is when he got to Oklahoma, he was the best athlete in the room, right? He's no longer he may still be more athletic in certain elements, but I think Kobe McKenzie gets laterally better than Kanik now, right? And that was a struggle for him, but he has put in the work. Kip Lewis, I would argue, he covers a lot more space just off a burst. And I don't think anybody does it like Lewis Carter. I think Lewis Carter has the best kind of close area explosion. And Stutzman obviously is going to be one of the best linebackers in the country. So that margin is razor thin now. But the thing about Lewis, Omsigo, Lewis Carter, right? Stutzman, McKenzie. Let's take Stutzman out of it. Those guys know how to play linebacker.
Hell, even put McCullough. Did you say McCullough?
And McCullough too, yeah, right? And McCullough's a really good athlete.
And Boomer 129, he said, can Kobe drop into coverage though? I don't think you're necessarily asking him to drop into coverage unless he's playing. And I think that this year, to be honest with you, I think that he could probably run the cover 3 better. I know that's something that has been a struggle for us simply because the linebackers don't ever know what the hell to do. And that you're just like, look, drop to your cloud, bro. Just drop to your cloud.
Race to depth. Race. Get there.
Yeah, but I think you're going to be fine this year. I don't think you're asking him to drop into coverage. I think that's why you have the cheetahs and different things like that on the field. For example, there was one where McCullough was out there as a cheetah, and McCullough was lined up on. He was lined up on. No, it wasn't McCullough. It was Samuel. I think Samuel was lined up on Burks, and then Jaylen Hardy finally came over there and was like, no. Pushed him inside. I said, no, I got this. I got this.
Hardy, by the way, I've talked about him. He played well, man. In the red zone, if you go watch some of those drives, OU going right to left in the red zone when they were down there throwing those passes to Jaden Gibson. Yeah. Watch the right side of that offense, man. Hardy has Hester. I think it was Hester out there. I'm trying to remember who else was that. He's got those guys locked up, man. I think he's gonna be a dude.
Hardy, Boganowski, those guys. When you look at them, hell, Eli Bowen, man. Those kids have put in the work in these first few months with Smitty. It's gonna be crazy. With as much of a height difference that Eli Bowen gives up, the guy is just. I mean, he's everywhere. He's a ball hawk, man. I think you probably see him bump back to safety, but especially when you're going against those bigger wide receivers. But he did not back down from trying to take on Carrion. And by the way, Carrion looks good. I thought he was going to be a guy that would probably get bumped to tight end. He's a wide receiver. When I watched him run, he is Gibson may be faster, but he has a better run style than Gibson. I was like, this is a guy that Gibson's kind of a guy that I feel like can outrun you. I feel like he can run routes, do different things like that, but he's a guy that's just going to can blow past you with his stride. Carrion, the way Carrion is built and the way Carrion goes about playing the wide receiver role, he's a guy that will break you down. And I think that he's going to have an expansive route tree before it's all said and done. Same thing with Kearney. I know Kearney didn't really get too many looks. He had, I think, like a drop or so, but I think Kearney's going to be really good out there too. But when you're talking about like the DB room, we're definitely in good hands because you have a variety. You have a variety of really good things that you go out there. Here's one question, since we're talking about Kanik. Obviously, people are in the comments talking about all that stuff. Let's talk about this transfer portal. Are there any guys that you see on this team that you're like, hey, maybe we're probably, and maybe if you don't want to speculate, that's perfectly fine. This will be the last topic that we have. Is there anybody, and I'll ask the chat too, is there anybody that you guys are like, hey, I mean, obviously Javonte Barnes is probably the first player that comes to a lot of people's minds, but what else? Or who else, excuse me.
Man, I'm trying to think who else is in that room, right? You've got, I mean, the thing with Harrington was a little bit of a surprise, but looking at it now, I kind of outside in, it makes sense, right? You were real high on Dolby, and Dolby, for all he did last year, he's a guy who he's a hard worker, man. He's a guy who is going to get after it. So he and McCullough, man, the injuries are a part of the game, but unfortunately they can knock you out sometimes. Yeah. And that's just a battle that, I don't see a guy like Kanik portaling just because of how he ended up at Oklahoma. He's a guy who maybe if things don't go right, he gets his degree, doesn't see playing time, then he's a player who portals out with 2 years left. Maybe he does something there. I think at the end of the day, Kanik was just hurt because he couldn't redshirt. He was a player who needed to redshirt his first year, and OU just didn't really have the luxury. They didn't have the ability to do that because they didn't have the depth. They were bad, right? None of those players on that first Venables defense for Oklahoma would sniff the 3 deep with who they've got right now. And I'm even talking about Deshaun White would be the 3rd guy.
Yeah.
At Cheetah. Yeah, it wouldn't even be close.
Bro, that 22 season was played out of necessity. That was, I think that was the word to describe that defense with some guys, necessity. Simply because some guys just weren't ready. And I know a lot of us were screaming, you gotta put them in there. Here's one question from Jimmy Satterfield that we can answer. He says, where do you think this defense will rank in the SEC? Jason says he thinks they're going to rank no worse than top 20 in the nation. I think this defense is going to be, depending on how the Tennessee game goes, if they can keep that game to realistically what it should be, we should win that game by 20, in my opinion. I know Tennessee's going to be pretty good. Tennessee's going to come in here and try to hit us in the mouth. But at some point, they're going to go and do the finesse thing. And you can't. I don't think that you can run Nico. I don't know how big he's gotten. I don't know if he's hit the weights like that. I don't think you can run him. You can run him in space, but I don't think you can run him between the tackles or run at people like you did last year with gosh, I'm forgetting his name. But you know what I'm talking about. So I don't think you can run at people with him. But and the reason why I say that is because I just don't want to get into a shootout with Tennessee. But like I said, I think this defense is probably going to rank in the top half of the SEC. I think you're probably looking at no worse than probably, I would say top 6 to 8. I would say at the worst, you're probably number
I'd say
8.
5,
Yeah,
6, man. I think they're going to be near the top half. I think they're going to be sniffing. I think Georgia is going to be a team who probably continues to be dominant just with how they've recruited. Alabama has players, but they've struggled, right? And they're bringing in a new coach, right? New voices. How does that thing turn out? OU, Venables defense, and granted it's SEC, it's not ACC.
Mm-hmm.
Third year at Clemson was when he hit his stride.
Yeah.
That's when he had his dudes. He had 3 years worth of development, and now some of those elite game changers started to see playing time. And I think there's also going to be a little bit of the new factor that gave Texas A&M and Missouri an advantage when they first got to the SEC, of just new arena to play in, different style of play, right? You played in the Big 12 for years. You've had players who are accustomed to that, right? We've seen teams out of the Big 12 get to the SEC and be very successful, right? Texas A&M was successful out the gate. Defensively, we'll see. I think it's easier sometimes for offense to do well. For me, if they're top 30, I think this offense, with what they got at receiver and with what it looks like they now have at running back with the development of some guys, Franklin really looks the part. You got Sawchuk looking healthy, right? Looking like he can move as he needs to move. Man, if you got a top 10 offense and a top 30 defense, you're gonna be in the playoff and you're gonna have a chance to win a national championship.
No, and that's definitely true. And I think some of the things that we highlight today should give Sooner fans a lot of hope because there's a lot to work with. This is far from a finished product. We didn't even get to any of the offensive line stuff that we talked about that ad nauseum on other pods. Jay Unfair Sports, Hall of Fame Football podcast. With Jason, obviously we did our instant reaction to the game, so definitely go check those videos out, run those videos up for sure. But no, I mean, all in all, man, I thought it was a really good day. What did you think? Did you think it was a pretty good day?
I thought so. This is what I said on Twitter. If there was ever a game where you came out of it saying, man, the offense played pretty good, but the defense played pretty good,
yeah,
it was this game. I think they both took turns. You saw the offense dominate in spots, which you want to see in these games. Elite players look elite, right? Burks looked unguardable at times. You want to have a guy like that. No team, I can't think of a team that has won a national championship that has not had a big-time elite pass catcher out there in the past decade.
That's true.
Right? So you got to have a guy who can go get a grab. And Andrell Anthony was kind of that guy. But if Andrell Anthony is your number 2, you've now got a squad. You've got some talent. So I thought the defense had moments where they dominated the game. And they obviously, the score showed as such. So, man, and I actually liked that scoring system quite a bit. I felt it actually – it mirrored what we were seeing in the game.
It was damn sure better than last year because that whole 140, 155, this stuff kind of got out of whack.
Yeah, it doesn't look good. Teams are going to use it on Twitter and show look at this right here. So it's the fan bases are going to do what they want with that. But man, I thought both sides of the ball. You saw elite guys look elite. You saw areas where players probably need room to improve. Jackson looked solid. Michael Hawkins looked better than what we saw him develop and start really taking strides end of junior year, senior year, high school, especially his last year of high school. Man, he really made some big strides. Man, seeing what he looked like out Saturday, very impressive. Arm, speed, acceleration, the whole 9. He looked really good.
No. Well, I'll say this right here. All in all, really excited about it. I'm hoping we get some more good news from a certain D lineman in the portal right now. I'm hoping, man, but we got some commits. There's a lot of great things happening around OU. So that being said, let's go ahead and wrap this bad boy up. Go ahead and tell everybody where they can find you at, Barry.
Yeah, man. Go check out all the clips. There's more than even what we've shown today over at BWise Fitness on X. Also follow me on Instagram at BWise Fitness. That's at letter B over here, WISE Fitness. Go check it out. We listen to the Barry and Mack show. We got some stuff coming out very soon. We've been working on some things, which is why we've kind of slow played the pod through the off season. We're working on putting some stuff together. But we do have some stuff out. We are still producing content, so go check that out. But in the meantime, I'm giving you guys what you want over there on X. Got a lot of videos that have gotten a lot of good feedback. Absolutely love it.
Smash that like button. Smash that like on all the channels. Go and give 5 stars to them on Apple Podcasts and all the podcasts and everything. Speaking of that, if you're listening to this on a podcast, I'm gonna upload this to our podcast for once. It's been a while. Definitely switch over to YouTube and see see the clips that we were kind of dissecting at first. This is a little bit different, but definitely like this. This won't be the last time that we do this for sure. As always, Barry, man, appreciate you for coming on to the show, bro. It's always game time. We do numbers, man. I'm excited about this season. That being said, let's get you out of that gym. I know you need to get home. So everybody, have a good night.
You know, there's a lot of great OU podcasts,